Picture yourself 2 full days without food. You know where the animals are grazing. Yesterday, you followed them, memorized their path, chose your target. Tomorrow, you hunt. Simple. Then the sky opens up. This isn't gentle rainfall. Water comes sideways, relentless, pounding the ground for an entire day. Then through the night, then into morning, still coming. Hunting becomes impossible. Footprints vanish under flowing mud. Walking across open terrain with bare feet on slick stone, one wrong step breaks your ankle, and a broken ankle this far from help means you die. The river beside your shelter is climbing its banks. Your fire, the single element keeping you warm and alive and protected, begins to fade. This isn't inconvenience. This is catastrophe. For almost all of human existence, storms like this killed people. Yet how our ancestors responded during these trapped, desperate hours may have shaped our species more than anything we accomplished under blue skies. When rain arrives today, you shut a window. Make tea, pull up a streaming service, settle into your couch and drift towards sleep while water drums harmlessly against glass. To someone alive 50,000 years ago, that identical sound meant 3 simultaneous threats, each one potentially lethal before the clouds cleared. First, temperature collapse. Wet skin loses warmth 25 times faster than dry skin. No raincoats existed, no weatherproof shelters. A prolonged storm in 50-degree weather, common at night across much of the world, including elevated regions of Africa, could drag core body temperature into fatal zones within hours. Second, rising water. Our ancestors lived primarily in caves and rock overhangs, usually positioned at hillside bases or along waterways. Heavy rainfall meant flash floods. Archaeological digs have uncovered thick flood deposits inside inhabited caves, proof that water surged in while families sheltered there. Some sites show abandonment immediately afterward. Nobody ever returned. Third, perhaps most dangerous, compressed territory. Rain forced every creature toward the same dry refuges. Humans, predators, prey animals, all crowding into identical spaces simultaneously. South African cave sites contain human skeletons alongside large cat remains in the same soil layers. Some human skulls bear puncture marks perfectly matching leopard fangs. Weather didn't just create discomfort, it shrank the entire landscape, jamming everything with teeth into close quarters. And through all of that chaos, one responsibility outweighed everything else. Keep fire burning. Why was this terrifying? Because until roughly 40,000 years ago, most humans probably couldn't create fire on demand. Evidence of controlled flame use stretches back 400,000 years to Kusum Cave in Israel, possibly a full million years at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. But maintaining an existing blaze and generating one from raw materials are completely separate abilities. For most of our history, most individuals lacked the second skill. If your flame died, you might never relight it. The solution? Carry embers. Some groups transported smoldering coals wrapped in green leaves. Others used woody fungus that could hold a spark internally and smolder for hours without visible flame. A biological match. This wasn't speculation. When researchers discovered Otzi, the 5,300-year-old frozen man preserved in alpine ice, they found a complete fire kit secured in his belt pouch. Fungus for holding heat, flint, iron pyrite for generating sparks, backup plant material. Even 50 centuries ago, losing fire was serious enough to warrant dedicated emergency equipment. So when storms arrived, fire took priority over everything, including shelter. Drag it deeper underground. Block wind with animal hides or branches. Feed it with precision. Too much fuel smothers it. Too little lets it starve. Locate dead lower limbs on evergreen trees, the branches still protected by canopy above, usually dry underneath. Split soaked logs to expose dry interior wood. Use birch bark as starter material because birch contains betulin, a compound that ignites even when drenched. During downpours, one person's sole responsibility might be fire attendants, sitting beside it for hours, feeding, shielding, monitoring. Because that flame represented warmth, visibility, safety, cooked nutrition, and the gravitational center of all group interaction. Letting it extinguish wasn't carelessness. It was group-wide potential death. So, fire survives. You're mostly dry, but you cannot leave. What now? You build things. Archaeological evidence is unambiguous. Caves overflow with manufacturing debris. Stone tools in every stage of completion. Mountains of flaking waste, those tiny rock chips that scatter when shaping an edge, concentrated in specific cave zones, exactly where someone would sit near firelight and work for extended periods. Stone wasn't the only material. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, researchers uncovered a 100,000-year-old pigment production facility, abalone shells serving as mixing vessels, ochre crushed into powder, bone implements for stirring and application. This transcended immediate survival. This was organized manufacturing. Someone occupied that cave, likely during rainfall, and systematically produced colored material using an established process. Then bone needles appeared. First evidence dates to 61,000 years ago in South Africa, spreading later across Europe and Asia. These are delicate precision instruments with microscopic drilled eyes. Nobody crafts a bone needle while fleeing danger. You make it seated, focused, with uninterrupted hours available. Storms provided exactly that. Here's where things get fascinating. At Abré du Maras, a Neanderthal site in France, archaeologists recovered a tiny fragment of twisted plant fiber, roughly 52,000 years old, the oldest direct string evidence ever found. At Hallefels Cave in Germany, they discovered a 35,000-year-old device carved from mammoth ivory featuring 4 holes and spiral grooves, engineered specifically for twisting plant material into rope. Someone sat underground and carved a dedicated cordage machine. Making rope is slow, repetitive, demands patience. Perfect work for terrible weather. And rope revolutionized existence. It enabled binding objects together, constructing superior shelters, creating snares, attaching tools to handles. Vast portions of human technology depend on cordage. String was almost certainly invented by someone trapped inside waiting for clear skies. Not just tools and rope. People were also improving their living spaces. At Sibidu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found something unexpected from 77,000 years ago. Bedding, actual constructed sleeping surfaces, layers of sedges, rushes, grasses deliberately arranged as mats. Top layers included Cape laurel leaves, a natural insect deterrent. Someone wasn't merely surviving in that cave, they were engineering comfort, creating home, and the bedding was periodically burned and refreshed to maintain cleanliness. 77,000 years ago, humans practiced pest management. But all of that, the implements, the cordage, the sleeping mats, that's functional adaptation. What emerged next is something entirely different. Art Chauvet Cave in southern France contains paintings approximately 36,000 years old. Lions, horses, rhinoceros, bears, rendered with observational accuracy and technical skill that still astonishes viewers. The artists understood anatomy, motion, spatial relationships. Some animals are depicted mid-stride, musculature engaged, heads rotating. These aren't casual sketches. These are products of people who studied these creatures for thousands of hours, then recreated them from memory, deep underground, by flickering firelight. Chauvet isn't unique. Lascaux, Altamira, Sulawesi in Indonesia, where cave paintings date back 45,000 years, making them the planet's oldest known figurative artwork. But here's what makes this remarkable. These images aren't positioned at cave entrances where you'd shelter from weather. They're located deep inside, sometimes hundreds of meters in, through constricted passages, in chambers requiring crawling to access. Someone carried animal fat lamps into absolute darkness and painted. Consider that. Nobody does this when conditions are ideal and hunting is productive. You do this when you've been trapped inside for days, already sharpened every implement you own, and nothing remains except going deeper into blackness and making something. We can't definitively prove cave art was a weather-contingent activity. But the logic holds. Humanity's most creative explosion occurred in precisely the locations where people were most likely confined indoors for extended duration. This suggests something bigger. Rain didn't just produce art. It might have generated culture itself. What happens when 15 to 30 people compress into confined space together for days with no tasks? You communicate. You listen. You transfer information. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Weissner published research comparing daytime versus nighttime conversations among the Juhwanzi people in the Kalahari Desert. During daylight, discussion centered on practical matters, territory, resources, grievances, but after dark, around fire, over 80% of conversation shifted to stories, songs, ceremonies. Firelight transformed communication content. It softened facial features, reduced tension, created space for vulnerability. The campfire wasn't just heat, it was humanity's first social platform, and material shared around that fire wasn't trivial. It was survival knowledge. Which water sources evaporate in summer, which plants are toxic, where quality flint deposits lie, how to track particular species. This isn't casual talk. This is critical information moving from one brain to another through language. Beyond practical knowledge came something else: stories, myths, explanations for why storms arrive and where they go. Every ancient culture possesses rain mythology. Someone originated those narratives. They almost certainly did so while experiencing exactly the situation the story attempts to explain. Here's how powerful this storytelling became. The oldest verified oral traditions are Australian Aboriginal accounts describing sea level changes that occurred roughly 7,000 years ago. Those narratives survived 7 millennia through nothing except people recounting them to each other. That kind of cultural memory doesn't develop unless groups invest enormous time doing exactly that, sitting together, retelling narratives repeatedly. So rainy days weren't wasted time. They were knowledge transfer time. Days when information moved from experienced to young, when abilities were taught through demonstration, when collective memory got reinforced and updated. Here's what nobody mentions. Rain wasn't always catastrophic. Sometimes it was the best possible event. After heavy rainfall, ground becomes soft. Soft ground means exceptional tracks, deep, clear, detailed. You can determine exactly which animals passed, how recently, their speed, their direction. Some of the world's finest tracking conditions emerge immediately after storms end. Rain also meant water collection and storage. Early humans understood this. Rock depressions that fill during rainfall exist near virtually every prehistoric habitation site. Some show evidence of being intentionally deepened to increase capacity. Water wasn't the only resource rain delivered. Mushrooms and certain plants flourish after storms. Tubers become easier to extract from moistened soil. Insects surface. Rainy periods didn't eliminate food supply. They completely transformed it. Groups that understood these transformations held massive advantages over those that didn't. Termites are perfect examples. They swarm after tropical African rains. They're among the most protein-dense foods available. No tools required, no weapons needed. You simply collect them. Modern chimpanzees gorge on termite swarms after storms. Early humans certainly did the same, probably at far larger scale. So what did ancient humans accomplish when it rained all day? Everything that mattered. They sustained fire. They manufactured implements for the next hunt. They sewed garments that would provide winter warmth. They twisted cordage that would secure shelters. They ground pigment for painting animals on underground walls. They narrated stories that would transmit survival knowledge across generations. And when rain finally ceased, they emerged onto softened earth covered in pristine animal tracks and resumed work. Storms didn't delay them. They provided time to prepare for everything following. Every implement, every garment, every narrative, every image on cave walls, all of it emerged from forced downtime, from hours and days when leaving was impossible and nothing existed except sitting near flame and thinking. Boredom didn't exist for them the way it does for you, because when you're sheltering underground with rain hammering outside and your survival depends on what you create with your hands in the coming hours, you don't experience boredom, you experience creativity, and that might be the single most important reason we still exist.